The silence of the stars. The stars had always felt like guardians, distant but eternal. As a child on the gentle world of Thresol, I used to believe they watched over us, the way elders watched over sleeping children. Now, as I floated through the darkness of space aboard an aging diplomatic vessel, I saw them for what they truly were. Silent, indifferent, cold. My name is Viral, an emissary of the Crothy Assembly, and I was sent with one task, to beg for mercy. We are a peaceful species. We build gardens, not armies. We heal, not conquer. For centuries, we believed our harmony would shield us from the chaos that plagued other worlds. Then the Vorak swarm arrived, an endless tide of flesh and metal, devouring entire planets in days. Thresol, our capital world, was already gone. I had watched it burn from orbit, helpless as my people screamed across comms that crackled and died. Our fleet, built for transport and trade, was shattered in the first hours of contact. The few survivors fled to the outer colonies, most of which were already under siege. And so the Assembly turned to the last resort, the Galactic Council, a federation of over 200 space-faring civilizations, many of them militarized and powerful. We had always paid our dues. We contributed scientists, arts, medicine. We believed that, in our darkest hour, they would come. They did not. The Council debated for 12 days. Representatives from iron-skinned war species and ancient telepathic minds argued protocol and jurisdiction. When the decision came, it was as if ice had filled my blood. The conflict is considered a localized extinction event. Intervention is not warranted. Those were the words burned into the data slate. Not even a pretense of compassion, just bureaucratic finality. The Council wouldn't risk their fleets. They wouldn't spend credits. Our suffering wasn't profitable. Our screams weren't convenient. The Assembly fractured after that. Some called for surrender. Others for suicide. I was chosen for something more desperate, a call to the void. There existed an ancient signal, stored in our deep archives, a first-age distress beacon, used by civilizations before the Council was ever formed. It carried one message, unfiltered and raw, translated into every known galactic dialect. We plead for mercy. Is anyone listening? We launched it, and we waited. We directed it to the edge worlds, to the rogue systems, to the unaligned planets not bound by Council law. Days passed, then weeks. Every morning, I checked the receivers. Every night, I faced the silence. Until the ping came. It was small, an automatic reply, ping from a system so distant it was almost forgotten. Sol 3. Earth. My console lit up with unfamiliar language packets, brute force decryption algorithms, and raw bandwidth pulses. The first thing translated was a single sentence. Message received. Stand by for full response. I stared at it, blinking. Earth was a minor world, technologically impressive, but politically insignificant, known more for erratic behavior and brutal internal wars than any sort of diplomacy. And yet there was an answer. Within hours, an actual transmission came through. A woman's face appeared on the screen, dark-skinned, strong-jawed, eyes sharp and unblinking. She wore a gray uniform with a faded patch on her shoulder. Human Defense Command. This is General Ava Ramirez, Earth Directorate Response Command. You said you need help. Tell us everything. I stumbled through the explanation. I showed her footage, cities falling under Vorak's shadow, the dying screams of my kin, the Council's cold verdict. She didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. When I was done, I waited for the words I had heard so many times. We're sorry. We can't get involved. Instead, she leaned forward and said, You're not alone anymore. The connection cut to static, and for a moment, I thought it was over. But then dozens of data packets flooded our system. Tactical scans, fleet configurations, logistical support plans. Within 24 hours, a human task force had been mobilized. Volunteers only, I was told. No conscription, no pay. They weren't doing it for profit. They were doing it because no one else would. When I asked her why Earth, a distant world with no stake in Crothy affairs, would risk its soldiers and ships for us, her reply was simple. Because once, we screamed for help too, and no one came. I ended the transmission with shaking hands. All across the stars, empires with fleets of fire and armies of steel had turned away. But from a pale blue world forgotten by most of the galaxy, a voice had answered. Not out of strategy, not out of duty, but because they remembered what it was like to bleed alone. The species of madmen and martyrs. The first human ships arrived in silence, sleek, functional, unadorned. They dropped out of hyperspace above the refugee world of Drenhal, where tens of thousands of Crothy civilians had fled after the fall of our homeworld. I stood on the landing field as the hulls of steel-gray frigates cut through our ochre skies. There were only 6 of them. I had expected more. But when their ramplays hissed open and the humans marched out, I understood the error in my assumption. These were not diplomats, not soldiers bound by ceremonial codes or paralyzed by council protocols. These were war fighters, scarred, worn, and deliberate. Their leader stepped forward, removing his helmet. His face was weathered, one eye clouded by an old wound. A jagged scar crossing his jaw like a knife had once disagreed with him. "Captain Isaac Boone," he said, "Earth's Vanguard Corps. What do you need us?" His voice was deep and flat, like someone who had spent a lifetime learning the sound of dying. I tried to explain about the Vorak flanking maneuvers, the fragility of our defenses, our inability to relocate the injured. But he waved it away with a tired gesture. "Save the strategy talk for my exo. Just point us to where people are hurting." They came with strange weapons, projectile-based, kinetic-driven, primitive by council standards. Yet when I watched them drill, I realized their simplicity was deceptive. Every movement was honed for efficiency. Every bullet placed with terrifying precision. They were not elegant. They were not graceful. But they were effective. That first evening, I sat with Boone around a shared heater on the edge of the camp perimeter. His soldiers rotated watch silently, eyes scanning the horizon, while mechanics reinforced the shuttle pads with human-fabricated alloy plating. "Why?" I asked him. "Why risk your lives for people you've never met?" Boone took a sip from a battered steel flask and looked toward the stars, eyes hard with memory. "Because the first time aliens came to us, they didn't come in peace." He told me about Earth's first contact, the Drail invasion, decades ago. Humanity was underestimated. The Drail thought Earth would fold in a month. It took them 10 years to realize their mistake. 10 years of trench warfare, orbital blockades, civilian massacres, and 10 years of humans refusing to break. When it was over, Boone said, "We rebuilt. But we never forgot. So now when someone else gets steamrolled by monsters, we don't wait for permission." He handed me the flask. I took a sip, fiery, bitter, alien. "That's not mercy," I said quietly. "That's vengeance." He smirked. "Maybe, but we've learned they're often the same thing." The next morning, a fresh wave of Vorak struck Drenhal's outer colony lines. Our defense grids buckled in minutes. Crothy militiamen, barely trained, were overwhelmed, our command structure in disarray. But Boone's people moved like a hammer to the wound. I watched a team of 6 humans hold a choke point against 30 Vorak drones for 25 minutes, laying down overlapping fields of fire and rotating cover positions like they shared a hive mind. When air support failed, they called for a hell drop, a single dropship packed with fuel and explosives rammed into the enemy breach and detonated. Not a single human hesitated. One man, Corporal Anders, volunteered to pilot it manually. He left his helmet on the ground and simply said, "For Threshold." He'd never seen our world, never met its people, but he still died for it. The Vorak line shattered. For the first time since the invasion, they retreated. Our people, we who had once believed war to be beneath us, watched in awe as the humans dragged wounded from the wreckage, bloodied and burned, yet smiling. Later, I found Private Samira Chun, a young medic who had leapt onto a collapsing bridge to pull 2 Crothy children to safety. Her leg was broken. She had wrapped it herself while continuing to treat others. "You don't even know our names," I whispered as she reset the bones of a Crothy elder. She laughed through the pain. That never stopped us before. That night, I watched her fall asleep beneath the shattered remains of a transport ship, covered in dust, surrounded by the wounded she refused to leave behind. and I realized something terrible and beautiful. The humans were not like the Council species, who saw battle as a calculation. Nor were they like us, who recoiled from violence with shame. They were something else entirely. They were a species of madmen and martyrs, unpredictable, stubborn, and terrifying in their compassion. When others measured cost, humans measured sacrifice. When others weighed odds, humans weighed souls. They did not fight because they expected victory. They fought because they could not bear the thought of doing nothing. The price of compassion. Drenhal didn't sleep anymore. The sky was choked with smoke, lit by flashes of distant orbital fire. The Vorak hadn't retreated for long. Their hive mind adapted quickly, and with each failed assault, they returned more brutal and efficient. The Krathi were breaking, but the humans? They held. Their numbers were thinning. Exhaustion clawed at them like a living thing. Yet every time the siren screamed, they answered, boots pounding, rifles ready, no hesitation. Captain Boone hadn't slept in 3 days. His voice was coarse, his armor scorched, but he stood like the world rested on his spine. I found him repairing a field generator outside the shattered west perimeter. His hands were trembling. Blood trickled from a cut on his temple. Your machines need rest, I said gently. So do your people, he replied. We rest when the screaming stops. Nearby, Private Chun was stabilizing a Krathi adolescent with a collapsed lung. Her own leg was still splinted. I had offered her better medical facilities. She refused. He's worse off, she had said. We begged them to rotate out, to fall back. They refused. The next Vorak offensive was different. They had adapted to human tactics, deploying new forms, armored drones with shielded carapaces, mimicking Council tech. They struck from the skies, bypassing trenches and tearing into the civilian shelters hidden beneath the cliffs of Crescent Ridge. That was where the humans were thinnest. Boone's entire unit redeployed within minutes, commandeering Krathi transports and rigging them for combat. They flew into the mouth of hell with weapons hot and orders clear. Hold at all costs. The battle at Crescent Ridge was a bloodbath. Boone's second-in-command, Lieutenant Weller, died leading a charge to secure the cliff edge, gunned down by Vorak flyers. Chun pulled 15 survivors from a burning tunnel before it collapsed, her hands raw, her uniform blackened. At one point, the Vorak breached the core shelter. A swarm of drones surged inside, 50 of them. Boone, bleeding from a shrapnel wound, sealed himself inside with them and triggered a manual EMP blast that knocked out every electronic device for a mile, including his own armor. He fought hand-to-hand with a sharpened vibroblade, protecting the survivors until reinforcements broke through. When we reached him, he was barely conscious. His armor had been punctured in 6 places. He smiled through broken teeth. Told you we don't fold easy. After the battle, I walked the ruined tunnels. Dozens of bodies, both human and Krathi, were lined up for identification. Our healers moved silently. Human medics helped them, offering what little they had left. There were no songs, no ceremonies, only silence and the soft murmur of mourning. Boone sat on a stone outcrop outside the shelter, helmet in his lap, eyes vacant. I sat beside him. I lost half my team today, he said. Good people, braver than I ever was. I said nothing. What could I say to a man who had given more than we ever deserved? We knew the risks, he continued. We came anyway. He turned his head, locking eyes with me. You want to know the cost of compassion, Viral? I nodded. This, he whispered, gesturing toward the field of the dead. This is the price, and we pay it willingly. That night, we received word that the Vorak's Central Hive Command had landed on Velharn, a nearby moon still under Krathi control. It was their brain, their anchor. Destroy it, and the swarm would fragment. But the Council, watching from their ivory towers, intervened at last. Not with help, not with soldiers, but with warnings. A dreadnought broadcasted a wide-range transmission. Human interference in sovereign war zones violates interstellar neutrality mandates. Immediate withdrawal is required. Failure to comply will result in sanctions. I played the message for Boone. He laughed. A low, bitter sound. Of course, he muttered. Now they care. He stood slowly, shoulders square, eyes alight with that quiet fury I had come to recognize. "You tell them this," he said. "Mercy doesn't ask for permission." The next day, Boone called for volunteers for a mission to infiltrate the Hive ship and detonate its core. Suicide by most standards. Every single member of his surviving team stepped forward. So did Shun. So did I. Boone refused me. "You're not a soldier." I shook my head. "Neither were you once." In the hours that followed, I watched them prepare. No fanfare, no speeches, just quiet nods, embraces, and the click of weapons being loaded one last time. Captain Boone gave me a small data chip. "Whatever happens," he said, "tell them what we did. Not because we want glory, but because someone needs to remember why we did it." "Why?" I asked one final time. He looked at the sky. "Because when we begged the stars for help, no one came. Now someone else is begging, and we're not going to let them die alone. What remains after fire?" We launched under silence. No fanfare, no backing fleet, just one-drop shuttle, patched with Crothy shielding and earth-forged armor, streaking across the void toward the Vorak Hive command on Velharn. Inside, we were 13, 9 humans, 3 Crothy, and Captain Isaac Boone. Each of us had volunteered, knowing we wouldn't return. That wasn't bravery. That was necessity. The Vorak knew we were coming. They always knew. The Hive ship loomed ahead like a wound in space. An obsidian spire stabbed into the moon's crust, pulsing with sickly green light. Anti-air fire lanced the sky, tearing holes through our atmosphere. The cockpit shook violently. A round struck our left wing. Boone didn't flinch. "Get us close," he barked. "We'll walk the rest." We crash-landed less than half a kilometer from the base. The moment the ram dropped, hell swallowed us. Vorak drones swarmed in from every direction, some crawling, others hovering, all in perfect sync. But the humans didn't break. They moved in a coordinated fury, laying down suppressive fire, covering each other's flanks, carving a path forward. One fell, then another. Still they pressed on. I followed, rifle shaking in my hands. Not because I was afraid to die. I already accepted that. But because I was afraid I wouldn't live long enough to see them win. We reached the Hive entrance. Boone took point, blasting a breaching charge onto the blackened hull. It exploded inward, revealing a tunnel of writhing muscle and machinery. Inside was alive, pulsing, twitching, watching. Boone turned to us, blood splattered across his cheek. 2 of us plant the charges. The rest by time. No one hesitated, not even me. We reached the core chamber 30 minutes later. Half our number were gone. Private Shun had taken a plasma bolt to the chest. She kept moving, dragging a wounded Crothy soldier with her. Boone had been shot twice, once in the thigh, once in the side. He walked like nothing happened. The Hive core pulsed before us. A massive, crystalline brain suspended in biomechanical tendrils, shielded by layers of bone armor. Boone handed me the final charge. "Set onto the spine," he said. "You've got small hands." I nodded and crawled through the tangled mess of wires and sinew. My fingers found a place. I activated the timer. 5 minutes. "Done," I shouted. Boone turned. "Fall back. Now." We didn't argue. The escape was chaos. The Hive knew. Doors slammed shut behind us. Drones poured in from the walls, ceiling, floor. 2 more humans died before we reached the outer hall. Boone limped, half carried by the last remaining corporal. I brought up the rear, firing blindly. At the outer gate, we found the shuttle still smoldering. Boone stopped. "You go," he said. I froze. "What?" He looked at the corpses around him. "We don't all make it. That's the cost. That's always been the cost." I grabbed his arm. "We can drag you. Together." "No," he said. "I've seen this play out. One of us gets out. That's going to be you." His voice was quiet. "Final. Make sure someone tells it right." The timer reached 0. I saw the flash before I heard the sound. Velharn's surface split open as the Hive core imploded. Shockwaves rippling through the crust, towers falling, drones shrieking as they died in sync. The hive mind collapsed like a marionette with its strings cut. Across the galaxy, Vorak forces faltered. Ships lost control. Ground troops convulsed. The swarm didn't just retreat, it died. The Crathi cheered. The council was silent. And Earth wept. They built no monuments, no statues, just names etched into black steel panels, sunk into the garden soil of a repopulated Thresol, where trees grow from the ashes. Captain Isaac Boone, Private Samira Chun, Corporal Anders, and the others, known only as voices in a radio, shadows and firelight, hands that lifted others even as they fell. I stood at that garden years later, older, slower, no longer a diplomat but a witness. Children played in the sun. The sky was quiet again. Beside me stood a young human officer in dress uniform, hat in hand. "They didn't die for you," he said. "They died because they couldn't bear not to." I nodded. I knew. I remembered every face, every scream, every laugh around a ration fire. And I remembered Boone's words. Because when we begged the stars for help, no one came. Now someone else is begging, and we won't let them die alone. That's what it means to be human, I've learned. Not perfect, not pure, but unwilling to stand by when others fall. Epilogue. The Galactic Council passed a resolution 6 months later, sanctioning Earth for unauthorized engagement. Earth refused to attend the hearing. When asked for a statement, their ambassador reportedly said, "We don't answer to those who ignore screams. We answer to the screams themselves." The Crathi renounced council membership soon after. We joined Earth, not as vassals, not as refugees, but as allies. Because in the end, when the void looked down on us and we cried for help, only the humans answer the call.